a great day to bike or carpool too, because there will be a lot of activity on the campus. In the foyer you pass through on your way into the sanctuary, we have what we call the welcome wall, the curved wall behind the welcome desk. And on it there is a collection of greetings in different languages. Welcome in English, hola and bienvenidos in Spanish, greetings in local Native American languages, because our state is not, it may be officially bilingual, but in reality it's multilingual, and we want our words of welcome to reflect the place where we live. And then there's Jambo, which is Swahili. One of these things is not like the others. Why do we have Swahili on a wall in Albuquerque? Well, it's because we have a sister congregation in Kitengela, Kenya, where Swahili is spoken, among other languages. That's the official language. For several years now, we've been friends with a small UU congregation there. They consist of about 100 adults and children. And many of you met one of their lay ministers, Josephat Manye, when he visited last year about that time. Anybody remember meeting Josephat? Yeah, lots of you did. Some of you also made gifts just a couple of weeks ago to a fund that pays school fees for that congregation's children. Most of the Kitengela congregation's members struggle very much to get by each day, and they can't afford to pay for their kids' education. First Unitarian's generosity empowered about 35 kids in the congregation to get an education last year. 35 kids went to school because of you. That is a big deal. And I met a lot of those kids, and they were really happy. Now, our friends in Kitengela are not the only UUs in Kenya. They are one of 6 young congregations that make up the UUCK, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Kenya. And we at First Unitarian aren't the only North American congregation that's forging friendships with them. We're one of several congregations that are now becoming a coalition, a multi-church group that partners with the UUCK. So there's a group of churches in Kenya partnering with a group of churches in the US and Canada. And actually, I'm trying to bring together a little group of people to form the core of our part in that partnership. And if you're interested in Kenyan UUism, come talk to me or send me a message. The UUCK is a relatively new organization. It's still finding its legs, and our friendships there are still very much developing. And so last month, I traveled to Kenya to see about supporting Unitarian Universalism and deepening our relationships there. I went along with a few colleagues. Sean is an old friend of mine, and he's the minister of the church, First Unitarian in Toronto, Canada. Steve is the executive director of the International Council of UUs. He lives in England, but he travels around the world supporting congregations in Africa, the Philippines, India, Transylvania, and beyond. Did you know we were all over the world like that? We really are. And Fulgence is the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Bujumbura, Burundi. Burundi is a country located west of Kenya, just across Lake Victoria, if you don't know your geography. 4 of the Kenyan congregations are right in the Nairobi metropolitan area, and 2 are way out in the country. During the prelude, you saw footage, a video that I took from the car window as we passed through. We drove probably 13 or 14 hours, out in the countryside in Kenya. Lots of different terrains. One of them looked a lot like New Mexico, if you noticed that. There'll be a link to that on our website, too, for online and branch listeners. The first congregation we visited there was in Nairobi, and let me tell you, it was a startling experience to go there, because in order to get to the congregation, you have to drive right into the heart of a huge slum. Here are a couple of snapshots from the road there. Ramshackle structures crammed together between decaying buildings and hills of dirt and trash and trash and trash everywhere. We passed through that cityscape for what felt like forever. We turned down a dirt road, still in that urban slum but unpaved, and then we passed through an alley that was so narrow you could not have opened the doors of the car. And the end of the alley opened into a small clearing, and across it we parked, and we walked through the doorway of a cement building to find this. There were about 50 people singing and dancing and clapping, and there was a brightly colored sign that said Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Kayole. There's one of the preachers that day at his music stand. The service was about 2 hours long. Not everyone made it through. The kids were all very patient, but this one zonked out. It was a good service. The preacher had a very evangelical style. He read from the Bible and he preached that if humans are made in the image of God, then you cannot love God without loving your neighbor, and you can't serve God without serving your neighbor. Every few minutes he peppered his speech with "Praise God," and the congregation yelled, "Amen." Another preacher translated everything into Swahili as he went along. All of the Kenyan congregations are Christian UU, meaning they preach a message of tolerance and inclusivity, but they do it from a liberal Christian perspective. We have a few Christian UU churches in the US as well, but most are more like this one. Here we draw from many different traditions, sometimes the Christian tradition, but also often Judaism, Buddhism, mysticism, philosophy, the arts, and science in our worship services. We speak of God or the holy sometimes, but God doesn't have a starring role in most services, because while for some of us, God is a deeply meaningful part of our spirituality, for others, we're atheists, and that's okay. We embrace theological diversity. We don't have to think alike to love alike. One of the things the North American churches have done is to create a social justice fund that belongs to the UUCK. The Kenyan congregations decide what the best use of the funds is. One runs a school for kids who have HIV or whose parents do. Another invested in farming to help its own members have more economically sustainable lives. In other words, to help them have enough to eat each day. And much of the money was invested as microloans for small businesses, mostly run by women who determined for themselves how to use it. So after the service in Kayole, we met many of those women and a couple of men, and here we have some photos of them standing in front of their wares. Baskets and jewelry. And then a group of the congregation's teenagers took off with Steve's iPhone and took 1 million selfies. Some things know no borders. Love is one, selfies are another. Here we are the next day, entering the town of Kitengela, where our sister congregation is. It looks a lot like Kayole, but it's south of Nairobi. And there we are with the members of that congregation who gathered that morning. Almost all of the children in this picture are students that you help go to school. This one's hard to see, but that's Josaphat leading worship, and George delivered the sermon. He also quoted scriptures, and he preached about embracing people with disabilities in the congregation and in society. In Kenya, this is a really different issue than it is in the United States. Most people who need wheelchairs, for example, cannot possibly afford them. And even if they could, well, you saw what the streets look like. No sidewalks, no ramps, no accessibility codes, so it was not a small thing, George was saying. He was really casting a vision. Here are Josaphat, George, and I. I'm the one in the middle. The congregation known as the Nairobi UU Church meets in a classroom. That's what it looks like. And their chalkboard caught my eye. It says similes, as innocent as a born baby, as impatient as a lover, as sure as death, as bitter as lemon. That about covers it. There we are with the group after touring several of the small woman-owned businesses that received microloans in that neighborhood. And here we are coming up in front of that school for HIV-affected kids run by the Central Kenyan congregation. The door says, "Strive to excel." There's a picture. There you go. The chalice right in the middle. Here's their classroom, rustic, colorful, and small. And the director's family farm, an hour away out in the countryside, which feeds those kids all throughout the year. There it is. It is the most fertile, densely planted farm I have ever seen. There's a huge cluster of bananas in that tree. You can kind of see they're green. It was far enough way out in the countryside that we caught some attention passing through the area. As our vehicle made a turn at one corner, there was a young kid standing there who was maybe about 7 years old, and when he caught sight of me and Sean and Steve in the car, he jumped and he shrieked some kind of an exclamation sound, and he pointed at us and yelled, "Wazungu, wazungu!" I said, "What is he saying?" to our guide, and she said, "It's the word for white people." She said it literally means aimless wanderer. I said, "Not all who wazungu are lost." Later, we visited Manga, the most remote congregation. It took us about 7 hours driving to get there. Here are a couple snapshots from there. This is Justin Magara. He's their lay minister, and he studied in the U.S. and was roommates with James Galasinski for a while, our ministerial resident. They know each other. A couple more slides from that visit. What a different place, what a different context to see the Unitarian Universalist faith in. In Kenya, the congregations are Christian UU, they are evangelical in style, they sing African hymns complete with the clapping, dancing, and ululating. And right now, due to the extreme poverty in Kenya, their social justice work is more in reach than outreach. Their sermons are about helping one another and about the mercy and goodness of God. By comparison, we rarely mention God in North American UU congregations. Here we are explicitly theologically diverse. We sing old German-style hymns and rock songs and Raffi, and I have not heard any of you ululating, though if you have that talent, it is time to come out of the gosh darn closet. Andy? Ululating? Nope. Can two such different versions of UU faith really fit under one church umbrella? This is the kind of diversity within Unitarian Universalism that leads some people to ask just what it is that keeps us together if we don't have a creed. What makes us one denomination or even one congregation if we're so different within it? At the end of our trip, my colleagues and I waited at the Nairobi airport and we discussed a question that has been a thorn in the side of liberal religion ever since World War II. Is the Unitarian Universalism we practice in North America relevant to the rest of the world? It became an issue during World War II because up to that point, Unitarians were big on the promise of education to fix humankind. If people were just educated, they'd stop hurting each other, we thought. That was the thinking. And then along came the Nazis. And it looked like maybe evil really was ingrained in humankind. Maybe it couldn't be stopped after all. We had somehow forgotten how pernicious it can be, how prevalent. Even though we were fond of pointing out that Thomas Jefferson was a Unitarian, and he was a slave owner. What about slavery? But anyway, World War II shook up that early 20th century confidence that humans had all they needed to eradicate evil. These days, in the information age, the angst in liberal religion comes from the awareness of so much suffering, of so many bad things happening. The Nazis have been defeated, but 1 million women and girls are missing from the planet because of gender discrimination. The globe is heating up, causing havoc to all, and especially to the world's most vulnerable people. All around the world, migrants are leaving dangerous places and they're taking dangerous trips to unwelcoming countries. The body of a 3-year-old washed up on a beach this week, for the love of God. There are terrorist attacks all the time. People kept asking me if I was nervous about traveling to Kenya because of recent terrorist activity there. But I've lost track of the number of attacks inside the United States in 2015. And so I'll tell you what I told them. I felt no more at risk in Kenya than I do at home. And so the question is, with all of that, what use is our liberal faith in those situations? In other traditions, you can say, we don't know God's plan. You can say it's the devil, or those who died are in a better place now, or that those who suffer were perhaps born into that life for a reason, something they needed to learn. But what does Unitarian Universalism have to say to the father of the baby on the beach, to people living in a huge slum in Nairobi? We speak out against climate change and big injustices, but what do we have to say to people who are suffering? And not just in Kenya or in Syria, but here in New Mexico too. When I met with the UUCK board in Nairobi, I think they were surprised to hear that our largest social justice project in this church is our food pantry. We serve about 70 bags per week of free groceries to people right here in our neighborhood who don't have enough to eat. I recently read that New Mexico is #1 for child hunger in our country. So there's a need and there's suffering in our city, in our congregation, and even right in the room, right here. In fact, if it was something like that nudged you into church today, some kind of suffering in your life, then if the Spirit moves in this place this morning, it's especially for you. What does liberal religion have to say to those who are suffering? We say, we are with you. We say, we see you. We say, you are more than your suffering. Let us hold that truth for you until you are able to know it again for yourself. We say, may you be blessed by the peace that passes understanding. And we say, may we help make it so through our way of being in the world. We asked ourselves in Kenya, what do you do when you stand in the face of unmeetable need, of extreme poverty? The answer is something, anything. Do something. Pay school fees, start a social justice fund, stay in relationship, and allow your friends there to give back to you, because if everyone has worth, then everyone has something worthy of sharing in a friendship. The relationships are important, and relationships across difference are a hallmark of our faith. While diverse expressions of our tradition may challenge outsiders to understand exactly what Unitarian Universalism is, on the inside we know it helps us to develop as spiritual people. Diversity across continents or right here in the sanctuary keeps us real. It keeps us from taking things for granted. That's why in the reading this morning, John Crestwell says that relationships are what save our faith. Actually, friendships across borders and across economic differences are what is going to change the world. Because as long as we think of people far away as other, as long as it takes a tiny body on a beach to startle us into seeing the humanity of people from other cultures, then we remain distant from the mind-numbing amount of bad news flowing at us from around the world. It's just overwhelming. But when we become familiar with people in other places and cultures, through our churches or through travel, we're changed in subtle but powerful ways. We and they are both empowered in relationship. Now, because of all of our theological diversity, sometimes someone says that in a Unitarian Universalist church you can believe whatever you want. But that's not true. You can't just believe anything you want because it matters what we believe. Whether someone is considered human or not is shaped by what we believe. Who can marry and who is treated as an economic partner and who is merely a commodity. Whose rights will be defended and which ones, all are shaped by what we believe. We affirm and promote 7 principles in our denomination, and they are beliefs, not in the sense of creeds or historical claims or descriptions of God. They're beliefs about what is of highest value in this world. They were read aloud in worship in the Kaiole congregation, the very first one that we visited. You can find a formal version of them later if you'd like in the first few pages of the gray hymnal. The informal version, which is how they were read in Kaiole, goes something like this. We honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We believe that everyone should be treated fairly and kindly. We believe we should accept one another and strive to keep learning together. We believe each person must be free to search for what is true and right. We believe all persons should have a vote about the things that concern them. We believe in working for a peaceful, fair, and free world. And we believe in caring for the interdependent web of life of which we are a part. These are important and even radical principles. In Africa, conservative religious voices have wreaked havoc, leading to homophobic violence and discouraging even condom use to prevent HIV, even where the rates are so high. Conservative religion has done great harm through a relentless enforcement of antiquated, misguided beliefs about God and humans. The UU principles and message of love and tolerance could not be more relevant in the world today, both abroad and at home, too. Look at the standoff over religious liberty right here in our country. Look at that county clerk in Kentucky this week. She defied the court order to give marriage certificates to same-sex couples. This is the bureaucratic U.S. version of the same kind of religious conservatism that has done harm in Africa. She wants to use her position as a county clerk to prevent others from practicing their religions, which may affirm, as ours does, the right to marriage equality. She thinks religious liberty is the right to impose restrictions on other people. Our faith, with its teachings of tolerance and justice, could not be more relevant right now. What is Unitarian Universalism? It is a religion with wide open eyes, a courageous faith. It's a faith that does not offer easy answers, but does offer depth and comfort and meaning and peace. It's a religion that builds bridges and not walls. And it's one that develops and grows in wisdom as we do. It's a religion that engages deeply with the question that launched all religions in the world, the question, what does this mean, this life? What does this mean? What does it mean to be human, to live, to have children, to encounter tremendous injustice? To have a heart that conflicts with your mind sometimes, to be complicated, to disappoint ourselves and others, to do all of it, all the things on that chalkboard, right, summed up in those little similes, to start life innocently and grow into all the nuances of being, to become impatient and grapple with our own mortality, to deal with life's bitterness as well as its breathtaking beauty and pleasure. Unitarian Universalism is a faith with a big heart and no borders, a faith that strives to embody love beyond belief. Wherever we are, far or near.
And now I invite you to rise in body or in voice. Join in the closing song, There Is More Love Somewhere. There is more